In a world of increasing mental health challenges, psychology and faith can both provide tools for healing and wellness. This is the idea behind Journey on My Mind. Each episode, our panel of pastors and therapists sit down together to share their experiences and insights on the modern world's mental health issues: depression, loneliness, aging, addiction, and so much more. Join us now as we explore what it means to thrive at the complex intersection of spirit and psychology.
Are we good? Okay, well, welcome to another Journey on My Mind. We are back from
hibernation.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Been a
I
minute.
was wondering what it was.
Hibernation.
Do you know I hate the month of February? Hate it. And
Why?
I'm glad we're done.
Okay,
Why
Dave.
do you hate February?
Because
only 28 days.
no, it's like the winter is just we're done with it by that point. You go through all of Christmas and New Year's and January, and then it's like we're done.
Ready
and
for
then you
spring.
still have a whole month of it's just miserable. It's my least favorite month. So I'm glad we're done.
Okay, well, don't move.
We're celebrating.
Don't move somewhere like Minnesota, because February is
well, you know, I was going to move to Minnesota until
or Michigan or Wisconsin.
Chicago.
Canada might be a choice, but
February
is kind of just the middle of it.
I've entertained fantasies of moving to Ottawa. That's already up there.
That's up there.
Yeah.
So if you don't like
cold, Dave,
and you don't like February, if you want February to be the last month of winter, I highly encourage you not to consider Ottawa.
Ellen and I have talked about, do we retire in the mountains because we have a house in the mountains of North Carolina?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it probably right now today that we're recording, it's probably like 11 degrees. So
maybe not.
Maybe not.
Sometimes when something not preferred happens in our government, Dave just texts me, Southeast Psych, Ottawa.
That's funny.
Southeast Psych, Ottawa, for the 8 people that live there.
Hey, it's the nation's capital. Did you know that?
What?
Ottawa is Canada's capital.
Okay. No, I did not know that. I do now. I do now.
See, this is what you get with the podcast. All kinds of
New learning.
Geography lessons and everything.
What province is it in?
Oh gosh.
Ooh, face. You don't know.
I'm trying to. I should know this. But I'm. Where is it? Like on the scope of Canada.
Not exciting.
Yeah, not exciting. Okay. Just fast forward. Everyone fast forward through this part.
Skip that
right here. Hey, Kevin, how's
Edit that out.
How's pickleball going?
Yeah, that's exciting. Yes, playing on Tuesday.
How you feeling?
I'm not feeling very good. I pulled a muscle or strained a muscle in my calf, and it's very painful to walk right now. So hopefully it'll recover in the next couple of weeks, and then I can do it again. But I enjoy pickleball very much. It is.
You guys are like pros, man. You play multiple times, right?
It's my replacement for what I used to play, racquetball.
Yeah. All right.
When I was younger and dumber.
Who of people
staff?
Staff or affiliated play? Give us the quick roster.
I usually play with Robert and Mike. Tim used to. He quit playing because he got tennis elbow.
Got it.
Pickleball.
Let's see.
Pickle elbow.
On staff. Who else on staff?
Lisa.
Lisa plays a lot.
Yeah,
But
Lisa.
don't play with Lisa.
Yeah, she's.
So that's my question. Who is the ringer? Like, who's the one? Who's top of the leaderboard?
Oh, I don't know.
It's you. If you said that,
it's Kevin.
That's hilarious.
You think it is?
I don't think so.
I've never, other than like on staff retreats, like I've not played with them, and so, or I haven't watched them. So I don't know. They were all pretty good.
If Tim kept playing,
you think he would have?
It'd be Tim.
Yeah.
But he stopped playing.
Yeah. I didn't know he got tennis elbow.
He did. That's why he
sad.
did. So So he has to.
No more pickleball for
No
Tim.
more pickleball.
It's pickleball elbow.
That's
Dave,
right.
have you considered playing pickleball?
I take that as a maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
What are we talking about today?
You don't
have you played?
I have played with some people in my neighborhood. We have some couple friends who play, and we had like a big tournament.
Yeah.
And it was all the dads and me, and they're like, "Come on, Lauren, you can do it. Play." And I played with them, and they were just sending me just little soft, and they're like, "You're so good. You're doing great. You should really play." They were just like too nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I was not good, but they were very encouraging, and it did make me want to continue.
That was like my first experience was playing at a church with people that were twice my age, and I'm 50. So, they like. I was I'm gonna take it
cards?
easy, you know. Like I'm
no, they
like,
smoked you, didn't they?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh my gosh, dude. Like, it made me look awful.
Embarrassed
me in front of my wife and kids. I'm like, I'm never coming back here.
Yeah. Lori started to play. We started playing together on Fridays, and then she got, what'd you call it, pickleball elbow. So she's been down and out for a little
funny.
bit.
Man.
Yeah. Pickleball elbow.
But if you keep playing, and it's
getting old stinks.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of fun.
Andrew and I are like, we can't do anything anymore. We don't get an injury.
That's right. Everything's at risk.
Yeah. Everything. So, well, welcome to Journey on My Mind, where we complain about our age, apparently. So, Dave, how was your hibernation?
It was great, actually. Yeah, we had a good winter.
Yep.
And had some good time with family, traveled a lot, did all the fun things.
Okay.
So, good stuff.
Sam?
Yeah. Just, I kind of like, where did it go?
I know.
I felt like we were going pretty quick, but I'm ready for spring. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Lauren?
It was great. Yeah. I mean, when you have young kids, it doesn't really feel like hibernation.
Yeah,
it's
that's
still
true. Yeah.
super busy.
But you got down to the beach at least once in that section of time.
Got down to the beach once. Loved the snow. I actually loved the like super rainy day we had. We stayed in and played games and stuff. So it was great.
That's fun.
Yeah, we went to
you went down
Wisconsin for a funeral. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
6 degrees below zero.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're
30,
there for a funeral.
30-degree wind chill factor.
Yeah.
30 below.
Yeah.
30 below. Yeah. That's painful.
I knew we would get to weather.
Yeah. It just took us 10 minutes.
Hilarious.
Again.
Yes. But
moving right along.
You know that weather is very uncertain. You could get certain
there we go. This is the transition.
different things, and you just never know what you're going to get. And that uncertainty sometimes is troubling. So why don't we just dive into the idea of uncertainty and talk about the psychology, and I think there's a lot of spiritual implications behind this idea of uncertainty. So if you want to frame for us what it is to discuss uncertainty from a definition standpoint, I've got some good ideas on where it goes spiritually. So does Sam. So let's dance.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic because that's one of the things that we all hear and we all experience is like, what is going on? It feels like very uncertain times, both on the kind of macro level and then, in our own family lives and all that. It's just like, what is happening right now? Where's this going?
Right.
And so the first thing I'll say is an obvious point, but what anxiety is a tendency for your brain to go into the future and try to figure out something that can't ever be figured out because you don't know all the variables. So by definition, anxiety is about uncertainty.
Oh.
Anxiety is the product of getting wrapped around the axle, fixated, wigged out by uncertainty. This may happen. Almost always, by the way, when people struggle with anxiety, almost always when the thing happens, it's not as bad as the worry that it might happen.
Right. For sure.
So we're living in a time where there's just kind of collective anxiety because everything feels uncertain and unclear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a side question. Have you ever been in a season of your life where there hasn't been uncertainty?
To varying degrees. I mean, I don't think there's ever a place where you're free of like everything's clear. That's not possible.
Right.
But I think to varying
So you always
degrees,
have to live with some measure.
some measure, yeah. It's just
of uncertainty.
It's the degree to which we're in a place of uncertainty.
Yeah. I personally hate uncertainty. I cope with it poorly. So I've gotten better at it. I've got some tips and tricks, but I'll just tell you, I've not arrived here.
Yeah.
Work in progress.
With big old work in progress. Yeah.
A lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many hours of my life I've wasted like wishing. I really wish I knew what was going to be happening in my life in a year or 5 years or 10 years. Like this urge to know is so strong. Yeah.
Yeah. The the idea that I've wondered if I knew what was coming, would I live it different? Mm-hmm. You know, is there, if I knew, this is what's going to happen to you over the next 5 years. Well, I don't want that to happen to me over the next 5 years. So I'm going to try and correct the course, or I would work against it, or rather than, I think certainty in and of itself is, I'll say it. I just think it's counterproductive to faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting thing with uncertainty to me, not just from a faith standpoint, is, you know, if you think about if there are things in your life right now mm-hmm. that are difficult, and somebody told you 4 years ago this may happen, mm-hmm. it would totally wig you out, mm-hmm. right? It'd freak you out.
Yeah.
But then when it happens, it can be hard. But usually, it's just like, all right, we're dealing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where that's fascinating to me is that almost always, like, the reality, if it happens, it can still be hard. It can be sad. It can be disappointing. It can be all those things. But it's almost like the tension of might that happen is worse than than
actually happening. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. For the most part, there are some things that have happened that I would put in a category of, I could have done without that.
Sure. Oh no, I'm not saying that. I mean, there are plenty of things that we've all experienced that are really, really bad.
Yeah.
It's just more saying when we're talking about uncertainty, that it's the anxiety and the worry about something might possibly happen is actually heavier on us emotionally
than the actual
than just
event.
Being in it. Like, now I know what I know what the variables are. I know what I got to deal with. Mm-hmm. Let's roll.
Right. I find myself saying in session with people and to myself oftentimes, you don't have to worry about that right now. The you then will deal with it. Like the you in a year or in a month or whatever, that you is going to deal with it. So, like, let you now just rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I think about some of the things in my life that have been difficult, and if I didn't know, if I speculated that they might happen, man, would that just be so heavy.
Yeah.
But then when you're in it, you're just like, all right, it's prime time.
Right.
To me, that's a good takeaway from this, if nothing else, because the part of what's wigging everybody out and stressing people out is, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm uncertain. And our collective anxiety is way
really high
up.
Yeah.
And we're all getting emotionally just wrecked.
Yeah.
And it's harder just to be like, okay, let's live in the now. Focus on the things we can control. Focus on staying present and mindful and living the day the best we can, and then we'll deal with what we have to then.
Is there any correlation between uncertainty and healthy anticipation of it in correlation with radical acceptance? You want to take that?
Well, I think radical acceptance is incredibly helpful, you know, when it comes to uncertainty, just going, I don't know what's coming. And so that is what it is. And I have to accept that.
Yeah.
I do think it's a helpful strategy to use.
Okay. Yeah. Because it feels like they're in the cahoots together.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you guys would say from a faith perspective and what you would say from a psychological perspective too, Dave, to people. I mean, not talking about myself here or anything. You know, those of us who have just the constant worst case scenario generator in your brain, right? Like you can't make the thought not happen, but you are always gaming out what the possibilities are. I mean, it would be great if I could just be like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to imagine those things. But I just have a built-in generator that is like, you know,
yeah.
I totally relate to that.
Okay, so I'm curious what you guys would say. I have some thoughts, but
well, go ahead. I don't think that way.
You don't think that way at all. That's interesting. Yeah, I was a worrywart as a kid. Like I would worry about all of these things or whatever it might be. My big fear was always like my mom and dad something would happen to them, or that they would get divorced. Those were my two, probably as a kid. And I mean, obviously there were probably things that shaped that. But, you know, and then those did happen. And so those have been experiences of like this fear as a kid that it did happen. And as they have happened, I agree. It's been my experience that you have, maybe you don't have what you need necessarily, but for me, in that people came around me. So I think as I was experiencing the uncertainty, I leaned into other people's certainty, just in my own experience at times. Like when I couldn't, like just to try and trust someone else's experience or what they, and also, I've learned that because I can future cast, and create a lot of worry for myself. And my tendency is to pull back and just, what's the next thing that I can do? What's the one next thing that I can do? So I try and encourage to take from the whole view and pull back to, what's the next right thing that you can do?
Manage it.
Manage. Yeah. How to manage that.
Yeah. When I'm confronted with uncertainty, it actually is, this sounds weird, but somewhat invigorating for me because there's risk involved.
Yeah.
There's something of an uncontrollable element, and there's a lot of those things. And I don't like routine. I don't like this, just the predictability built in. So with that comes this, I get bored easy. So I look for things that will intrigue me or push me. Yeah. So the uncertainty actually is a gift for me. And part of it is I have this, I'm pretty convinced that I'll figure it out. I just, whatever it is,
we'll figure it out.
Figure it out.
Well, it's interesting. Like uncertainty never made me like risk averse though. So
it hasn't.
It's a different it's uncertainty in different ways maybe, but so that's what's always felt like, it's kind of a dichotomy. I've never been risk averse, but I've also been a worry wart. It's like, how do those
happens
things
all
work?
the time. I have many clients who they're like jumping off bridges and yet they're just a wreck about something else in their life. It's just very common, and so it's hard for them to understand that. It's like, if I'm so anxious, then why am I doing
exactly.
why am I doing rock climbing and other dangerous things,
taking risks.
I go back to the process when we planted a church. Like there's very little safety net when you plant a church. So there's this faith exercise. There's these things that you go through, and you've done it. So it's something we have in common. But the sheer exhilaration of the thought that there's no safety net and that there is a good chance this is going to fail, because I think it's like when I planted the churches, like 70% of them fail in the first 2 years. So there's a good chance it's going to fail. There's a good chance that I will screw something up. But there was something about that was really
exciting,
really attractive.
You and I are very similar. We're different in a lot of ways. We're really similar in that way. And that for me is very appealing. And I like to do things that scare me. I've not really said this ever out loud, but part of the reason why I started doing these magic shows, not just little magic gigs, but the magic shows, because I hadn't done it and it could fail. And it could be a disaster. And that even within that, there are, the nature of the kind of stuff that I do depends on other people's response. So it can always fail. So like even one of the shows at Thurgood, the very first thing I did failed. It did. It failed.
You're like, this is not starting.
Not starting. We're not off to a good start. But that, I don't know, that's exhilarating to me. And the psychological point that I want to make is, in the face of, if you think about the progression, uncertainty is the product or produces anxiety. What happens? Anxiety is a form of fear. What's the response to fear? Fight or flight. So a flight response is avoidance, pulling back, going away from it, or avoiding it,
or lean in, maybe,
or but a fight response
that
is,
makes sense.
Let's go,
right,
and so those are just different. It's not necessarily one's better or worse, but I think typically, if we're talking about managing anxiety well with these kinds of things, it's probably a good idea to make deliberate choices to have fight responses. What we know is that psychologically, with anxiety, with worry, with fear, the more it's avoided, the worse it gets. And the more it is confronted and the more you push into it, the better it gets. Although not initially.
Right.
Initially, it's actually worse. Initially, it's like, I feel like I want to jump out of my skin. But then it gets better.
Yeah.
I had a guy recently who's an athlete, and he says, I still feel like I want to vomit before every game, but then I have the first play, and I'm anxious the second, and then by the end, I'm in my flow state, and I'm good.
Yeah.
Right? That's what anxiety is like. It's like the more you're training your brain to be like, we're in it rather than avoiding it.
I feel like that's what I've had to do. And for me, like, it's that pulling back to like, what's the next thing I can do is how I would get down the road with any of that, you know? So yeah, that's fascinating.
I think understanding your anxiety is really powerful too, knowing that the reason I'm generating these worries or these worst case scenarios is because my brain's just trying to protect me. It's trying to help me game plan and to not be so scared of those. Just be like, those thoughts are there for a reason. Thank you, brain, you know, for showing me those.
That's good.
And I think like over time, the more we view it that way, the more accepting we are of it, actually the less often and the less intense the thoughts do become. Like I can't control that I have those thoughts. We're actually staying with my parents right now because we have
Why?
We're doing a renovation on our house. And so we're staying with them for like 2 weeks. And I can say this, my mom goes to this church because she would laugh because she laughs at herself about it. But like we're staying there and she's showing us how the fireplace works because they're out of town. And she goes, now make sure you open the flue, because if you don't, it'll gas the whole house and kill all of you. And I was like,
Your mom would say that.
Mom.
And then she just laughed. And like, I know this is ridiculous, but like when you grow up with that, you got it in your brain. All the worst cases. And that makes the fear of uncertainty, I think, heightened. Harder.
That's really interesting. Because I've some of that is probably really because my mom was a worrywart. Like there was that.
It gets modeled.
It was probably modeled.
The interesting thing is anxiety travels in families for two reasons. One is that if someone is anxious by nature, by sort of biologically anxious, then their kids are more likely to inherit that. And then also they're the recipient of an anxious training, style of parenting, right? Where you're observing as a kid all this stuff that.
So what would be the opposite of that?
Well, I think I'm the double whammy on that. Like I was anxious, and then I had anxious,
right?
So that's
it
totally does.
Is indifference the opposite of that?
Being trusting and experiencing a little more peace. I don't think it was that,
because it definitely wasn't anxiety, and it definitely wasn't trusting. That's
Wait,
funny.
the opposite of anxious parenting? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
To me, the opposite of anxious parenting would be not coming from a place of fear, but coming from a place of trust and
confidence and
or
that
indifference,
resulting in more peace. I don't know if that's the opposite. It's certainly different, but I wouldn't put it the opposite into the spectrum. Indifference, that's kind of like a more abandoned.
It feels like apathetic. Indifference is apathetic.
The one thing I want to coattail on what Lauren is saying is, our tendency when we're anxious in our heads is to create these scenarios and try to solve them. And it's actually, like she said, it's your brain trying to help you, right? You're trying to figure, you're used to solving problems. You're used to figuring things out. The problem with it is that it's trying to solve a problem that it can't possibly solve.
Right.
Like, will I ... will this ...
Right.
And there's too many moving parts and variables and things. It's not solvable. And so that part of managing anxiety well is to not allow yourself to get stuck on things that are just eating up all the real estate in your head and ultimately don't solve a problem.
Right.
If there is a problem to be solved, like, I know that we need to make this plan or do this thing, then great. Mobilize yourself to do it. But the trick then is not to get stuck on the things that are, it could be this, and what about this, and this giant decision tree in your head that ultimately is meaningless and pointless because it doesn't solve a problem.
It's just disruptive.
Right.
Ultimately,
See, in the church, oftentimes this gets minimized. Is what I would argue.
Big time. Be fearful for nothing and all these things.
Have no anxiety.
Don't worry. Do not worry.
And because tomorrow has enough worries of its own, and so we can platitude this to death,
totally,
without giving it the proper attention and also empathy. It took me a hot minute to figure out how to do this in ministry, to be able to sit with somebody who was really anxious, because I'm like, why do you do this? For
Because
me,
because you
not
don't.
wired that
right?
way, yeah.
I'm like, well, don't stop.
So helpful.
Stop it. You know, there's
Knock it off.
So helpful.
if you would just stop thinking that way.
Kevin Dixon, licensed psychologist. Knock it off.
So it was one of the reasons why I actually took some classes on counseling, because I was staring at people
baffled.
going,
Yeah.
why would you think that way? You know, so it was a good lesson for me. One of the first things I was exposed to, a couple of things I was exposed to out of the gate was this, coupled with a lot of family physical abuse in the community that I was pastoring first round, and I didn't know what to do that either. Why would you do this to your wife?
Yeah.
And I need some help. I need to talk to some people about how to do this better. Anyway, all that to say this is that all the things I was taught in school didn't work. So in seminary, oh, we need to pray about this. And these are some of your prayers that you could do, or these some of the things. Not that there's anything wrong with giving people prayers, but what I was trying to uncover in some people in a spiritual way was, where do you think God is in this? So I started to ask this question of people who were struggling with uncertainty. Where do you think God is in all this? Well, then I had strains of theology pop up. So what I mean by that is I had a good reformer come. Well, he's sovereign. He knows everything. He knows exactly what's going to happen. He has a perfect plan for my life. So what's, again, the real wise 26-year-old goes, then what's the problem? Then trust the plan. And he's like, I can't. And I'm like, okay, why? Well, there's so many things that he could do with my life. There's so many, and he would go down all these paths. And I go, yeah, but he's in charge of that. You're not in charge of that. So we'd have this theological discussion. And yet it did not settle for this person. He could not settle on the idea that God was in charge of that. Yeah. So then I said, do you trust God? Yes. I don't think you do. So we had a conversation more around the trust of God than we did around uncertainty. And eventually he began to, what became revealed, he just didn't trust God with his future. And so we had to talk through how to trust God with his future. That was a different conversation.
Yeah.
But the uncertainty of the future was so paralyzing for him, he couldn't do a thing because he wanted to do exactly what God wanted him to do. So then we had to move to a different conversation about how God's will works. And so this idea of uncertainty fits into this category of how does God actually interact with us as humans in such a way that he pulls away some of the variables. He doesn't. We still have all the choices, and he will be with us no matter which choice we make. And for some people, it's a question of whether they trust that or not.
That's interesting.
And whether that's enough.
So for this,
is it enough for God to be with you?
So for him, the lip service was to God's sovereignty,
right? Yeah.
But the actual
he didn't really believe it.
Heart, he wasn't there. It was more of in his. Just in
he
his
knew
mind.
the answer to the question.
Yeah,
he just didn't believe it. So belief mattered. In this case. I think we frustrated Dave.
No, not at all. No, this is what these are the waters we swim in all the time.
Right.
I'm, as we wrap up, though, I'm curious from both of you guys to hear. All right, how do you tackle this from a faith and spiritual community standpoint? What's you're intercepting all these people worried about the future and uncertainty about the country and uncertainty about their family and so on. Where has this evolved to for you, and where are you with this?
Do you want to go?
You go ahead, Kev. I'm going to think for a second.
I think, even when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I think I got diagnosed with cancer and I don't know what the future holds," or there's a lot of uncertainty with that. There's a lot of my kid just got diagnosed with this, and there's a lot of uncertainty with that. And so there is in the community, and when you talk about a church and when you talk about it, there is a vulnerability with exposing it. And what I've found is the people that don't expose it, don't wait and say, I think they play the case out so many times in their mind that the anxiety is overwhelming God's not involved. If he is involved, he's more of a whipping boy on the side, somebody to blame for what is happening. Mm-hmm. So you have to bring the community to a place where they have it's a culture of, I'm going to start talking about this when I'm frustrated, before it gets too big. I want my community to speak into this. Maybe there's an answer within the community as to why I am the way I am. And so it allows for the mind to speak out something that puts light on it. I think truth and lies lie in there. I believe lies in my mind that when I speak them out, I go, what was I thinking, right? So it's the idea of bringing into the light, and I would say into the community, what the struggle is, so that the community can be a resource for which they can find.
Come around and
they can either find comfort, they can find help, they can find community, they can find identity, they can find what they need but if you keep it to yourself, it doesn't work.
So making it safe, it's safest for
place,
people
right,
to be able to lean in that. Yeah, I think also too, probably somewhat maybe in everyone's Christian experience, maybe not, but that we've been given these prescriptive approaches that this will work if you do this, like blah blah,
right,
and
you parent kids a certain way, the outcome is a certain
That's right.
thing.
Yeah, it's like
you
these
relate
guaranteed
to your spouse
outcomes.
This way, the outcome is this way. Right. All these outcomes that are baked in.
That's right. Yeah, and then they don't happen. Right? Maybe some do, some don't. But then you're like, whoa. Right. So I've encouraged, and I encourage. This is the work that I do for myself too, is just to be reminded that it's the witness of God's Spirit in that, like that. I'm not in this alone.
You said witness.
Witness, in the witness.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard witness.
Witness, with.
Yeah, God with us.
God with us, yeah. And so not that, it's not the promise of he's going to fix it and take it all away and, that everything's just going to be peaches, but that in the midst of it, you're not alone and he's with you in that, Yeah. Now, obviously in that conversation, there's an assumption of some kind of faith and belief in that. So for those conversations, I kind of lean in that way. Yeah. So one of the ways.
Yeah.
I'll say one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Those lines is, we live in a world where almost everything we do, there is a non-zero chance of something not going well. And if we have to have certainty, we would never get on a plane. We would never get in a car. We would never eat certain foods. We would never do anything.
That's right.
And so we are, by nature of being human in the world, living in a world where there's non-zero chances of almost everything.
Yep.
And so just to acknowledge that and then see that if we're living in times that feel uncertain, that's the nature of the human experience.
It is.
And it does give us an opportunity to grow in our relationship with God in an authentic way, and also just to be people that increasingly become more resilient and courageous in the face of that. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here that I don't want us to miss.
Yeah. That's good.
I think uncertainty is fertile ground for faith. No doubt about it. And we live in uncertainty. And may we find ourselves certain of that. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Journey on My Mind. If you enjoyed it, please help us spread the word by leaving us a review and sharing it on your social media. Journey on My Mind is a production of Journey Church in Brentwood, Tennessee. Edwin Rivera III is the show's producer with technical assistance from Randy Hansen. Grant Opperman edits the show. If you have a suggestion for a future topic or a question, you can text us at 615-861-9503. And if you would like to talk to someone about spiritual or mental health issues, you can email our care pastor, Sam Barnhart, at sam@journeytn.com.